The employees of Bloomberg News have always had to strike a tricky balance when it comes to their boss, who's both a media mogul and a national political player. So far, they've made it work, but now that Mike Bloomberg is eyeing a presidential bid, the independence of his journalists is getting its toughest test yet. Adam Riley has more.
So far, discussion of Michael Bloomberg's possible presidential run has focused on his seriousness,
Michael Bloomberg has commissioned a poll,
his prospects,
I think it's an extreme long shot,
and the reaction of candidates who are already in.
You're going to have two multi-billionaires running for president of the United States.
I have the highest respect for him.
I'd love to have him in.
But Bloomberg's interest, which he recently confirmed to the Financial Times, also raises a big journalistic question. Namely, how would Bloomberg News cover a campaign by its owner?
There's an opening there for someone with $1 billion to spend and the profile of competent manager.
For the record, Mark Halperin says that take has nothing to do with the fact that he's a Bloomberg employee.
What I think about this is independent of the fact that he owns the company for which I work.
But if Bloomberg does throw his hat in the ring, the question of bias will linger, no matter who Bloomberg News is talking about.
Well, honestly, there's really not much good news in this poll for Bernie Sanders.
Recently, Bloomberg News' top Washington editor quit, saying reporting on the boss's presidential ambitions hasn't been as aggressive as it should be. Best of luck to her replacement.
It's been Bloomberg's policy that within the company, you don't cover Michael Bloomberg's wealth or his personal life. Well, that doesn't work. If you're a presidential candidate, they're going to have to change that policy. They're going to have to do because everybody is subject to the same rules. And if they're not aggressive like everybody else, it's going to look, even if they say that they're independent and they can say whatever they want, if they don't go after all of those angles as the rest of the media will, it'll look like they're favoring their guy.
I'm going to be very surprised if Michael Bloomberg actually does run. I think it's an unlikely possibility. He likes having the conversation around it. I think actually, it's Michael Bloomberg's company. It's a privately held company. He can set whatever rules he wants. It's up to his customers to decide whether they are going to continue to value what he's providing, his company's providing. Bloomberg doesn't make any money off of its politics coverage. It makes all of its money off of the terminals that it rents to people on Wall Street at an enormous sum of money. And they're not primarily looking for political coverage in that vein. That said, I think one of the other elements of this is that, when a few weeks ago when Sheldon Adelson bought the Las Vegas newspaper, one of the problems that people had with that was that he was now going to be able to use the reporters of that newspaper as sort of his own private investigative army, sending them to go against people who he didn't like. If Bloomberg is running for president, then he has lots of political reporters who are following all the other campaigns. Sure. That's a source of internal intelligence. I can't imagine that if Michael Bloomberg is running that, any of the other campaigns are going to say, "Oh, sure, Mark Halperin, come in, cover our campaigns." It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I keep thinking that Bloomberg is going to run, but what Josh is saying, that may be a reason that he doesn't run, because it would just be so disruptive to his company, which has made him so fabulously wealthy, and he may not want to go there. I mean, you talk about conflicts of interest. The Washington Post has to deal with covering Amazon because of the Jeff Bezos ownership. The Globe has to deal with the John Henry ownership and the Red Sox. This is exponentially more difficult than either of those situations. And in the long run, Bloomberg may have to choose between the two, and he may ultimately...
Well, he did step aside from his company when he ran for mayor and when he was mayor.
I think he's going to
put it aside.
I think if he wants to
Which is different from a coverage issue.
I think if he wants to make a serious run for president, he's going to have to do more than step aside. I think he may have to completely separate himself.
Yeah, I totally agree. How are you if you work at Bloomberg? I don't care what area of the news you're covering. Foreign affairs, financial news, the campaign itself. There's going to be conflicts in everything, real or perceived. I mean, when someone is elected, they put their financial holdings in a blind trust, right? Isn't that the standard thing? I think he might have to do it the day he announces to alleviate at least some of the pressure and all this stuff. It's going to be a total mess.
Well, then how does he self-finance? I mean, one of the reasons that people say he could do it if he wanted to is that he has these billions that he could use to get himself on ballots and all the rest. That's the practical aspect of it. From the journalistic aspect of it, I just see a man keeping a long list. So let's say he put everything in a trust, and the people are allowed to cover him as they would everybody else. Eventually, either he's president or he's not. And he comes back and it's, "Hi, Dan, so you wrote, what about me?
Yeah.
Can you pack your bag?"
That's
You know,
That's a
what I'm
very
saying.
real possibility because
Yeah.
apparently, once he left the mayor's office, he's become very
Yeah,
involved in the day-to-day
hands-on.
operations there, and there's
Yeah.
been a lot of blood on the carpet. I don't know that you could prove a connection with stories that were done about his mayoralty, but the perception is there.
There have been reports that he's not that crazy about their expansion into a general news service anyway. I mean, Bloomberg Politics has become a respected source of political news, but there were reports that Michael Bloomberg really doesn't care about it, and he's saying, "Why aren't we just doing financial news? That's what made the company."
Yeah, and the other complicating factor is that so much of his wealth is not liquid. It's the ownership of the company. He owns the majority of the company. That's not something you can put into a blind trust. That he has, over $40 billion worth of wealth in the company. That's,
Yeah,
that's
he's going to have
you
to
can't
sell
really
some of that as
separate from
Cali
that.
points because he's going to have to hire people to get those signatures if he wants to
And
get
there
on the
will not be
ballot.
enough time to do that between now and the election.
Sell off
might.
a couple condos, he'll be all set.
He might.